Rewind, your week in review is sponsored by the Transportation Development Association of Wisconsin. Sharing one goal, enhancing the quality of life in Wisconsin through the development and maintenance of a strong transportation network. The Transportation Development Association of Wisconsin. It's how we get there.
Because I don't want to go backwards. I want to keep going forward. Together, that's exactly where we're going to go. God bless you.
I'm Steve Walders.
And I'm J.R. Ross.
This is Rewind, WisPolitics and WisconsinEye summary of this week, and in this case, politics. Hey, J.R., let's give I was there the week off. Let's go right into the news. Some pictures, as they say, are worth 1,000 words, but a picture came up that's worth about 8,000 words in today's campaign season. The picture of our governor, and I want to get her name right, Marlia Butina, who's now sitting in a federal jail cell in Washington, charged with conspiracy and acting as a foreign agent. Now, what's your understanding? Was this taken at when the governor was running for president?
Yeah, during that period in December 2015. This is a case of bad timing for Walker, that this is all coming while President Trump is having his Russia moment, or one of several. I mean, I don't know this is a long-lasting story with legs. It is, though, a distraction that's trying to pull him away from what he wants to talk about, things he's doing well in Wisconsin, when fundraising numbers are coming out. So I don't know that it's something that you're going to see ads in October about this, but it's something to pull you off message a little bit.
Well, and the governor was forced to tell reporters in Appleton, look, I have not been contacted by the FBI. And he said, you and I have seen politicians do all these grip and grin photo ops, and sometimes they charge what? If a president comes in, $25,000 to get a one-on-one photo op. So the governor said, we go to events, we meet people, they introduce themselves, often they ask for a picture. That's not a meeting. That's not a meeting. A meeting is where you sit down in a room and have a discussion. It's just another person we met. So the governor's saying, nothing to see here.
Yeah, well, what's your definition of a meeting? So they obviously met because they're in a picture, but did they sit down and talk? I mean, one story said that he greeted her in Russian,
Which I found just amazing.
So, again, it seems more like a distraction than it is like a true scandal right now, unless something else comes out that tells you there's something more going on.
Right, and then the Democratic Party chairman, now that we know Scott Walker met with a Russian operative seeking to infiltrate our politics, Wisconsinites are waiting for transparency from Walker. The public deserves a full accounting of any other meetings he held with Russian nationals or other foreign interests in the lead up, during, and following his presidential campaign. Is this a one-week story? Are we going to be talking about this for 2-3 weeks from now?
If something else comes out, yes. If it doesn't, maybe not. So, it's hard to see where it goes right now because I'm not, part of the investigation at Washington, D.C. or have access to those records. So what else might come up? But again, it comes at a time when we're talking about Russia a lot because of President Trump. It kind of adds fuel to this fire. Plus, she was trying to gain access to Republicans to sway them. That was part of the charge that she was put under, according to the stories I read.
And I want to come back to a point made earlier. It forced the governor to say, I have not been contacted by the FBI, which is very interesting. Okay, the Marquette University poll of Democrats likely to vote in the August 14th primary, and it rated all 8 candidates, and JR Undecided lead, and it went from 31% in June to 38% in July, correct?
Yes, 2 things happened since then. Andy Gronick and Dana Wachs have both dropped out.
Yes.
So that's happened. Otherwise, between the June poll and now, we haven't seen a whole lot. We did have that debate that we co-hosted last Thursday, but there's been no paid media really. There's been they've done a couple of forums, but nothing's really happened to change that race from the June poll to now. And the question comes though now is, okay, what's going to happen now? Because we've seen Kelda's going up on TV, Flynn's going up on TV, Evers has got a bye starting July 31st at least, maybe earlier. So that's going to scramble this race significantly, possibly, between now and then.
Well, you and I saw the press release from the Tony Evers campaign. We're surging. They gained 6 percentage points. But another side of this story, as either you reported or another organization did, if you total up all the other candidates, they do not have Mr. Evers' 31%. So you have seen no dramatic increase, no traction on the part of Kelda and Malin, and no dramatic traction, and yet the primary is, 3 weeks away?
And it's because they're not on paid media. And what's interesting is, honestly, the Marquette poll, great thing that we have. If I were running a primary race and wanted to survey primary voters, that's not necessarily how I would go about it, because I would be targeting primary voters. This is a sample of 800 registered voters. You ask them, are you likely to vote in the Republican primary or Democratic primary?
So you get a subset.
Then you end up with a margin of error plus or minus 6.6 points for the Democratic one, 7 for the Republican one. So again, not to knock the poll, but there are other ways. If I want to get a better gauge of just primary voters, I might go a different way. That said, what you're seeing is Evers, the trend is his support is going up. Nobody else is getting traction. So what I say between now and August 14th, if you are Tony Evers, you want to keep building on that. You have name ID. That name ID translates into the lead. I've heard 2 theories we've talked about before. One, if you are another person like a Kelda Roys, a Malin Mitchell, a Matt Flynn, whomever, if you just present a positive message on TV and radio, that'll get people to go, oh, I'm going to take a second look and go over here and maybe draw their attention to you. The second one is, no, that's not enough. You have to tear Tony down while you're building yourself up. And oh, by the way, it'd be much better if you had an outside group tearing Tony down, because if you do it yourself, sometimes you do the dirty work. Voters don't like that about you. The question I have, is there enough money and time between now and August 14th to scramble this race? Looking at their finance reports, like Kelda reported the most money, I think, cash on hand. But that was bolstered by this second mortgage she took out.
We'll get to those numbers in a minute. Here's my question. Do you think the Gronick and Walk supporters fell into the undecideds, which raised it from 31 to 38?
Maybe, but again, with the margin of error of plus or minus 6.6 points,
good point.
It's hard to know. For example, let's pull back and think about the whole controversy about the Broadcast Association. Remember, using the Marquette poll as a guide?
Yeah.
If you had used this Marquette poll plus the fundraising benchmark, it would have ended up being Evers, Flynn, Mitchell, and Roys.
That's a good point.
Even though Roys is in a tie for 6th in the poll, Soglin and Vinehout didn't cross the threshold for financially to be considered for that debate. So there are lots of things going on, but it's like this race just hasn't popped yet. It hasn't taken off, and nobody's grabbed the bull by the horns yet and taken that race over.
Let's come back to the Evers press release. We're surging because we went from 18% in February or March to 25 in June, and now we're up to 31. Is that a surge?
Using the Marquette poll as a guide, it is a sign of momentum. But again, this is 38% undecided. There's a whole lot of people out there that you don't know what's going to happen. The question I continue to have is, can they get those folks on board, these other people, the Keldas, the Malins, the Flynns, the Vinehouts, the McCabe's, can they get their attention between now and August 14th? If you're Evers, you're in a good position. You spend your money to reinforce that position. You can kind of run out the clock and be in good shape, because if you think about it, at 38%, let's just say Kelda, Malin, and Flynn, who are the ones we think are going to be up on TV, all right?
Yeah.
Let's say they split that 38% 3 ways.
Okay.
They still don't
9 percentage points each.
They still don't get up into the 20s. That's a problem. So you have to find a way to pull Evers back to catch him.
Okay. Also, you spent a lot of time, a lot of energy this week charting how much money all these candidates have raised. So let's just focus on the Democrats. In the January through June period, number one fundraiser was Kelda Roys, but now give your caveat.
It's $250,000 from her own pocket. Now, we count that as raised because they pulled it in. It spends the same way, but it was boosted by her own checkbook. So the question is, that was perceived by some people to be attempted to show a strength. Okay, look, this is how much money I have. I'm in a good position to finish out this race. When push comes to shove, is she going to spend that money? Because it's not like dollar in. Not like that dollar has to go out. You can kind of keep this money in reserve and see how things are going, and then go from there. So will that money actually go out the door? Because if it doesn't win, she's then owing how much money in her house? That's not a great place to be.
Okay.
Mitchell,
number two, over that 6-month window, raised $524,000.
A lot of that is union money. So we're not seeing a lot of, not a huge amount of individual support. So the union are giving to him. One big question about Mitchell is, will we see a union come in or a union-backed group and do an ad for him to bolster whatever he does? Much like with Kelda, Emily's List has endorsed her. Will that group do a TV ad, some kind of buy to help her out? We haven't really seen an outside group, an independent group, that would do something for Evers yet. So how might groups play in this primary? How might they go up on paid media?
And you mentioned Tony Evers. He raised in that 6-month window $497,000, which is a respectable number, but he's
Also
still third.
gave himself $100,000 too.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, you had Kelda and Tony Evers and Matt Flynn with personal loans. Interesting, Malin Mitchell didn't stake his campaign with any personal loan.
Well, you know, he's president of Firefighters Union. I mean, I don't know what he's got to bear personally for this. Again, the window is rapidly closing.
It is.
You got to scramble this race. And so if you're Evers, you feel good because they have to come get you, right? And if you're Malin, if you're Kelda, if you're Flynn and the others, how do you go get Tony Evers right now?
Of the other candidates, just on the money raised, I was surprised. McCabe outraised both Madison Mayor Soglin, who just announced he's not going to seek another term, and Senator Kathleen Vineout. $156,000 for Mike McCabe.
Again, also put his own money into the campaign, though.
Yeah.
So
true.
He has a
$25,000.
He has a cap of $200 per donation. I think $1,000 per donor. But he went above and beyond that from his own pocket. So a lot of these guys are finding out difficult time fundraising because it's an 8-person field, right? How do you get traction with an 8-person field and have somebody go, I'm going to place my bet on this candidate right now and have faith that's not going to come back to burn me? Because don't forget, candidates who don't get your support remember that sometimes. So a lot of stories about Jim Doyle and not forgetting like who didn't back him in certain races. So if you bet on the wrong horse and then post-primary, how do you make up?
Tommy Thompson has a great memory for who did not support him in the U.S. Senate in 2012. Okay, let's look quickly at cash on hand, because you and I watched that. Who's got the most money in the final days leading up to the primary? Roy, $668,000. We talked about that. Mr. Evers, $497,000. $403 for Flynn, $368 for Mitchell. Any comments on that?
Yeah, again, just Kelda's is boosted by the $250 on top of $95 or $96 you gave herself in the first fundraising period. So when push comes to shove, will she put that money out the door? It could be a matter of, you know, is she in good position? And don't forget with these paid media buys, how much broadcast TV do you watch right now?
Yeah.
Right? So unless you're watching the news, like we don't watch the shows during the week because they're reruns, right?
Okay.
We're doing stuff outside. We're enjoying our summer. So how are you going to reach people right now between now and August 14th? Like I watch Brewer games, you know. So are you doing like more digital ads?
They're no longer in first place.
I know. Doing digital ads? Are you doing like buying during the news, the morning news shows? Like who are you reaching? Are you trying to find the engaged voter? Or do you take a more of a cable approach, like MSNBC for Democrats, Fox News for Republicans, that kind of thing? Okay,
now we've had 2 topics on Democrats. So let's end both these topics listening to a very short clip from Charles Franklin talking about the poll.
I think Evers has shown not only the fact that he stands out away from the crowd in each of our 3 surveys, but has also increased his advantage over that period. But that said, a 31% of the vote now with 38 undecided is hardly a commanding lead. But none of the rest of the field has started to emerge, at least in the voters' responses, of breaking out into the teens, for example, or showing a real surge in voter awareness. With, again, 38 undecided, and the candidate's not that well known, it's possible the undecideds and those who don't know will converge around one candidate.
And the Marquette poll also measured the Republicans likely to vote in the primary for the U.S. Senate, State Senator Leah Vukmir and Kevin Nicholson. And Vukmir is declaring victory, but she has a 2 percentage point lead, 34 for 30 to 32. But she points out this is the first lead for her in the Marquette poll.
Okay.
But
I got to be polling geek. She's not leading. It's about even with a 7-point margin for error.
It's a dead heat.
That is not a lead. Drives me crazy, fellow reporters. But what's interesting is there's been momentum toward Vukmir. Now,
momentum.
Again,
dead heat because of a 7% margin of error.
7-point margin of error. The caveats about, you know, maybe other ways of the survey of primary and who's going to turn out August 14th. But she's gone from, you know, Nicholson's at +9 to +5 to -2. So there's a momentum. Now, a Nicholson, a Restoration PAC, a Super PAC backing Nicholson gave me a poll yesterday that has him up on Vukmir by like however many points. So what's going on? Honestly, I don't know. It's fascinating about this race is that Leah Vukmir has all this establishment support, all the groups that will turn people out. The NRA's endorsed her this week.
The
party's endorsed her. Paul Ryan, Jim Sensenbrenner. You've got all this establishment support, right? But you have Nicholson with the financial resources. Here we sit Friday morning. I have not seen Leah Vukmir's fundraising numbers for the second quarter yet. We got them from Baldwin and Nicholson last week. Why is that? The assumption is she's not raising much money as Kevin Nicholson did. While she's got all this support, they're in a rate, great endorsement, don't get me wrong. But Club for Growth, through its kind of this arm it's working with in the state, dropped $2 million on TV. Now, the flip side though for Nicholson is who will turn voters out for him August 14th? The party is one of the best turnout machines that we know of for Republicans in Wisconsin, right?
Yeah.
So who's going to turn people out for him? Who are his volunteers? Who are his groups doing things? So it's just like they've got a bounty of one thing but not the other in this race. And honestly, I don't know what's going to happen come August 14th. I would not predict anything because like Vukmir needs a credible paid media campaign on top of the grassroots support to pull this thing out. And I'm not seeing it yet. Wisconsin Next PAC did like $200-some thousand on TV, but 200,000, 2 million. I mean, like, and what more is going to come? Don't forget, they've got these giant super donors in Diane Hendricks for Vukmir and Dick Uline for Nicholson.
Yes.
Uline, who's been funding these Club for Growth ads and that kind of thing.
Writing big checks.
Will they keep writing big checks? Will they write a bigger check? And if you're Nicholson and you've had all this money spent on you through TV and you're not running away with it, what's that tell you?
Right, and Wisconsin, I had a chance to interview Senator Vukmir this week, and we asked her about the NRA endorsement and its importance. Let's listen to what she said on that.
The NRA endorsement is fantastic. It's huge. It's very important. We are a state that embraces sportsman hunting, and and as a woman, personal protection. That's become a new aspect of the Second Amendment for a lot of people, and it was certainly an issue for me as personal protection that got me into being a gun owner and having a concealed carry permit.
Final question on this: Isn't there an attempt to stage a unity rally right after the August 14th primary
Fundraiser with Hendricks and Senator Hendricks and Uline supposed to be there.
Right.
Well, it's going to be fascinating to watch. If you are Kevin Nicholson and you win the primary, how are you the party going to function and the establishment post-primary going forward? And if you're the party and you don't deliver for Leah Vukmir, what's it say about your prowess as a turnout machine in Republican elections?
Okay, some other numbers that you at WisPolitics came up with. The governor had a good 6 months, raised $5.5 million. Cash on hand July 1, $6 million. Lieutenant Governor Rebecca Kleefisch, $450,000, although you pointed out that was a drop from 4 years ago. But she cash on hand $1.7 million. But the party off the charts in terms of growth, in $2.5 million raised, which is a result of the change in the campaign finance laws?
It used to be there was a limit of $10,000 per year per donor. So if I'm giving money to people, I can get, it used to be able to, that was a cap for candidates, parties, everything. There was never a limit on contribution limit size besides that, the party. Once you eliminate that cap of $10,000 per year, you can do unlimited donations to a party.
Right.
So that's helped fuel the party. What's interesting is Walker and Kleefisch are both behind the pace they set in 2014. Now, 2014, Scott Walker raised like $8-some million the first half of 2014. So he's down a third. So this is a great number normally, but Scott Walker's at the bar so high for fundraisers in Wisconsin. By the way, we also crossed the $100 million mark.
I'm glad you pointed that because
as a fundraiser.
Now, but that's $100 million from 2009 when he announced for governor for the first time. $100 million, he's raised $100 million. Tommy never came close? Nobody else came close?
Nobody ever will, because part of that is fueled by the recall election. He had a period where he had no limits on his contribution.
That's true.
He raised $37 million, I think, in that recall election.
37.
That's a third of it. But Walker has all kinds of resources to spread his message, which the Democrats don't. Now, once we get past the primary, independent groups will weigh in. We'll have, I think there's $5 million in TV already reserved by the DGA and the Democratic Governors Association, $5 million in the Republican Governors Association. So there will not be a dearth of ads this fall. But Walker has a huge financial advantage right now on the Democrats. He more than doubled what the entire field raised in the first 6 months of the year.
So when you total up the cash on hand, Walker $6 million, and the lieutenant governor 1.7, and the party sitting on $1 million, commanding lead.
Yeah, financially, absolutely. Now Marquette did not do a head-to-head this time, so we don't know. But then again, what changed from the June survey until now that would really have moved that race?
Right. Okay. I also found it. This is the last thing we're going to pluck from the Charles Franklin poll. I found the regional split on the condition of the state highways very interesting. If you're in northern Wisconsin, which is kind of a line from La Crosse, Eau Claire, Wausau to Green Bay, 2 out of 3 respondents said our state highways are fair or poor, only 1/3 excellent or good. But when you turn that around, the Madison and Milwaukee markets and southern Wisconsin, 52% only fair or poor state highways, 48% excellent or good. Is this a reflection of all the cash that's going to Racine County for Foxconn and the backlash?
Where are the 2 biggest projects in Wisconsin history? The Marquette and the zoo.
Yeah, and now you have Foxconn.
Yeah.
In 90. Oh,
This is a reflection of the debate that we heard throughout the budget, last 2 budgets, from Republicans who were in charge saying, all this cash is going to southeast Wisconsin. What about my backyard? It's been a perpetual complaint because we have these mega projects that are sucking up all the money. Now, once the zoo is done, or whatever they decide is the end point of the zoo, where's it going to go next? I mean, if you look at the grand scheme of things, there's people want to rebuild 894. They want to rebuild 94 between the Marquette and the zoo. 43 has to have work done someday. So can they keep doing those at the expense of putting money elsewhere, which is why Walker has played up like the investments in the rehabilitation fund, another state highway work. He was up in Neenah, was that a week ago, talking about 441 and 10. So there's all these projects out state that want to get funded, and there's this kind of like grumbling from Republicans of it always goes to southeastern Wisconsin.
Yeah, I just found that very interesting.
Oh, and don't forget the Madison area. What we have?
The Beltline.
90 north-south.
Yeah,
going
to
6 lanes.
The Beltline to Verona, which is on the slow walk to completion. Before we go to stock picks, let's talk about just quickly the expanding Foxconn footprint. They're going to do manufacturing in Racine. Then they buy the NML building as their national headquarters. Innovation Center in Green Bay, and now last week announcement of an Innovation Center in Eau Claire. Political significance of those?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Walker needs to show that there's a footprint outside of Racine, because look at the Marquette poll again this week. It showed that people outstate are skeptical. It's going to pay off. So how do you reverse that? You try and plant the flag other places. Now, will it work? Who knows? I mean, like we said before, it could be decades before we know if this thing actually panned out.
I understand. The governor's approval rating in this week's MU poll was what?
47, 45 job approval, just a little bit different from 49, 47 a month ago.
Not much change.
No,
margin of error change.
What Walker folks look at as a right track, wrong track. It's solid at 52, 45-ish, I think it was, unchanged the month before. To Republican Walker backers, that 52 number, that's his high. That's his basically his ceiling. That's everything he can get. Long as people are happy with how the state's going, he can get that number, they think.
Okay, let's turn to your stock picks. Rising.
So Lisa Neubauer, Chief Appeals Court judge running for Supreme Court, dropped her fundraising report, $350,000. Now, of that, $250,000 was her own pocket, okay? But that sends a show of strength that she has the ability to fund that way, right? To put that much money in. The more impressive piece is the $100,000 she raised in about 10 days for this report that suggests to people, wait, she's doing this in the middle of the August-November elections? She's pulling money for a race next spring? That's a signal being sent about her strength. Now, Neubauer is out of the gate talking about shunning labels, kind of running more of a traditional experienced Supreme Court campaign we used to see. This past spring race became more of a kind of stance one, right? Tim Burns ran as an unabashed progressive. Dallek kind of started left of center, moved a little bit farther left in the race. What will this race look like next spring, we'll see. But if you're somebody like a Judge Borowski in Milwaukee, Susan Happ, just kind of DA, Burns again, if thinking about running again, and you're from the left of the dial, you're going, ooh, can I match that? If you're a conservative, like a Brian Hagedorn, Maria Lazar, you're going, oh, I've got to be ready to make that kind of a mark financially.
That's true.
And what else can she do?
But you as a numbers wonk, you also reported this week the final numbers on the Dallett versus Skronik. Dallett 1.3 million?
Roughly, yeah.
And Skronik 1.1.
Now, it doesn't include outside spending.
I understand.
But yeah, I mean, she outraised them, which, for progress, I mean, other than Shirley Abramson in that race back in 2009, and Ann Walsh Bradley, when the race didn't really take off, traditionally you expect conservatives to kind of outraise progressive candidates in these races. So.
Okay. Next.
So Glenn Grothman, that district should not be in play most years. The question is it in play this year? How big the wave have to be? If you're Dan Cole, you're doing the right things to take advantage of a big enough wave. He's outraised Grothman now 4 straight quarters. Now, Cole had 1.1 million cash on hand to 800,000 and change for Grothman. I mean, Glenn's not been known as a big fundraiser his career, right? He's more of a grassroots, work the district kind of guy. I don't know that race is going to pop. I really don't, because I don't know how big the wave is going to be, if there even is a wave coming. But if you look at that district, it's also very expensive to advertise in. It touches the Madison market, the Milwaukee market, and the Green Bay market.
Green Bay market.
You know, and Glenn Grothman was not the number one fundraiser in the primary in 2014.
That's a good point.
Right?
Yep.
So it's like Grothman's trailing, but I just don't know that race is going to pop in the end.
Okay, and falling?
So Donald Trump, I mean, this poll was taken by Marquette before the Helsinki news conference, which was panned by both sides. He was upside down, which is not new. I mean, he's been upside down Wisconsin the entire time Marquette's been doing polls. What is new, though, is you have Ron Johnson, you have Paul Ryan, Mike Gallagher pushing back on the president and his comments about Russia and saying, no, they are not our friend. They are an adversary. This has got to stop. You also have Ron Johnson doing a roundtable in Milwaukee Monday morning saying, here's what's happened because of these terrorists, Mr. President, and then sending a letter to him saying, you're doing damage. We have not really seen Republicans stand up very often to the president because there's, some people I talked to, not a big upside because the base is there. In this last poll from Marquette, I think it was 90% of Republicans backed the president, or 88, like really high. So very much he has got the base behind him. So if you cross him, you could alienate the base. Well, Paul Ryan's not running for re-election. Ron Johnson, not running again. At least as they say, he's not going to run again. So they don't have to worry about that. They're taking a stand and pushing back against him. And if this poll had been taken after all that fallout from Monday, Tuesday, what would have said possibly? You know, I don't know. But it's interesting to watch that kind of play out.
Well, it's interesting because the president is upside down in terms of his approval, disapproval, yet he won Wisconsin in November of 2016.
One voice that was not pushing back against the president this week, Scott Walker. And that's that dance I've talked about.
He's repeatedly asked, and he repeatedly
It's a
says,
federal
I've
issue.
got other things
So it's that
to worry about.
That line of walking, if he doesn't want to alienate the Trump voter in northern and western Wisconsin, he needs to get traditional Republican base turnout in southeastern Wisconsin. It's a difficult place to be in, but some people think, hey, you can carve out a niche of saying, I agree with the president on most things, but not on this. This is hurting Wisconsin manufacturers, hurting Wisconsin farmers, but he just hasn't pushed that button yet.
Amazing election year. I'm Steve Walders.
And I'm J.R. Ross.
Have a good week off next week. Patrick Marley will be sitting in your place. That's Rewind for July 20.
Rewind, Your Week in Review is sponsored by the Transportation Development Association of Wisconsin. Sharing one goal, enhancing the quality of life in Wisconsin through the development and maintenance of a strong transportation network. The Transportation Development Association of Wisconsin. It's how we get there.